You see, it has long been noted by both shaman and scientist alike that the relationship between humans and these entheogenic plants have existed for millennia upon millennia, specifically, and more or less exclusively in a religious setting. Now, the word religion sparks a very strong reaction in people, and I need to clear something up real quick. If you're currently a member of a religion, then that reaction is going to be something between neutral and positive, most likely. If you do not consider yourself religious or consider yourself an agnostic or an atheist, you probably recoil a bit when that word reaches your ears. You even hear the term among those who aren't of the atheistic crowd, at least, who say things like, I'm spiritual, but not religious. And we all, for the most part, immediately understand what someone who says that means. Because if you live in the United States, at least, we live in, effectively, a religious monoculture. In other words, when people say, I'm spiritual but not religious, they're more accurately saying, I'm spiritual, but I don't believe in the classical and generic Christian church doctrine, Protestant or Catholic. And if they wanted to just be totally accurate in their wording of things, they would probably say, I am religious, but I don't believe in the classical, generic Christian church doctrine, Protestant or Catholic. And this would apply not just for Christian doctrine, but for any of the Abrahamic doctrines that are so common and really rooted into our culture. You see, the way popular culture seems to use the word religion, and the actual dictionary and, much more importantly, legal definition of the word, is very, very different. In popular culture, among a lot of people, but especially the more evangelical of Christians and, amusingly, hardcore atheists alike, there is a conception that religion must include and be centered around a specific deity, that there must be a hierarchical structure, that their adherents must prostrate themselves before the pulpit, and on and on and on. But basically, it's got to look something like the modern Protestant or Catholic Church in most structural ways, both in human organization and beliefs regarding the divine. But this conception of the word religion is, in fact, the result of ignorance. Let's start with the dictionary definition of the word, which I'm going to say right off the bat, I don't necessarily think is all that important, but it's a good starting point before going into the legal definition. So, the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines religion as a personal set or institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices. Well, that's nice, but it kind of begs the question, what's the definition of religious attitudes? Thankfully, they've got a definition for that too. The definition of the word religious, according to Merriam-Webster, is relating to or manifesting faithful devotion to an acknowledged ultimate reality or deity. I could go into the dictionary's other definitions of religion, but it really isn't necessary. Already, these definitions are quite a bit more broad than you'd expect. It explicitly states that religion can be both an institutionalized system or a personal set of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices. So you don't need an institution to be a part of a religion. And in the definition of the word religious, it specifies explicitly that we're talking about deity and or an ultimate reality. I think that would be a little surprising to most people. It certainly clears some things up. Because already, if we were to go off of this definition, most, if not practically all, of those people who say, I'm spiritual but not religious, if we're going to be talking literally, they are religious. They practice a religion. They may not call it that, but by all reasonable accounts, that's what it is. They are practicing their religion. But again, the dictionary definition is not always the legal definition, and that's where things can get tricky. However, in the case of the legal definition of religion at least, that is certainly not the case. The First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America guarantees the right and freedom of religion. It's quite clear about that. But what's interesting, though, is that there's no single clear statute in U.S. federal law that authoritatively defines religion. In fact, the legal definition, as things often go in these areas, comes down to case law. In the 1965 case of United States v. Seeger, the court ruled that, and I quote, a religion, in legal terms, includes a sincere and meaningful belief which occupies a place in the life of its possessor parallel to that filled by the Orthodox belief in God. And this quite intelligent and broad, notably, definition of religion was strengthened in the Welsh v. United States case of 1970, in which it was stated that religion can be a deeply held moral or ethical belief system, even without belief in a traditional deity, as long as it plays a comparable role in a person's life. And more or less, this seems to be the definition of religion, legally speaking. Now, I laid all of this out because, like I said, I know that there is a sizable group of people who start running for the hills when the word religion is used. And there's a large group of people who would probably want to go to the mat arguing with me that psychedelics are not religious in nature. And in fact, they have nothing to do with religion. But at the end of the day, and in almost every way, whether we're talking historically, phenomenologically, sociologically, anthropologically, or anything else, the entheogenic plants cannot be separated from their reality to divinity. The most ground level, primal, primitive, you could say, an intuitive way that these plants have been used is for direct communion and connection with the divine.